Hello and welcome to the second panel of the inaugural edition of the Neev Literature Festival. If you've just joined us, I have a few housekeeping rules to share with you. Before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Karthika. I'm the anchor for this evening. I'm a part of the festival organizing team. We will have a panel discussion beginning shortly on the topic of boundaries on the edge, boundaries within. It will be moderated by the author Siddhartha Sarma. During the panel discussion, we will be launching a few polls. You're free to interact with these polls. We would love to get the audience's responses on it. If you have a question, please do type it out in the Q&A box, and we will respond to you, and we will share a few questions with the panelists as well. So without further ado, let me introduce Siddhartha Sharma. He's an author, he's a journalist, he's a historian. He's written several books, including Year of the Weeds, The Grasshoppers Run. Siddharth, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kar. We have Rinchin. She's worked in Chhattisgarh. She's a writer. She has written for children. We have Aijaz Khan. He's a director, and we have Kenny Basumatary.
Hi, Siddharth.
Kenny, are you there? Hi.
Yes,
Good
now
afternoon.
I'm here. Hola.
Okay. Hi. And Kenny, who's joining us from Guwahati.
Hellos.
So we'll begin with Rinchin. So Rinchin has been working in Chhattisgarh around the Riker area. She's worked a lot with children, and that's one thing that we'll be talking to her about. She's also written for children, including The Trickster Bird, which is about how people are displaced. The people of a particular community are displaced. It's also a story of traditions, of folk tales. And there is also I Will Save My Land, which is about a struggle for protecting indigenous land and indigenous heritage. So, Rinchin, you have worked a lot with indigenous communities on various issues, including with children. So, how has the experience been, and how did you happen to arrive there?
I think for almost for 2 decades, I've been involved in people's movements, and it is slowly my involvement in development issues and understanding the inequities that exist in this world, and working with movements and communities. I think it's been a long journey through which one has sort of understood and I think reached a point where you also understand that while on one hand we know and we see that inequities in the world exist. I think when most of us when we were growing up, we knew that the world was unequal, but to a large extent sometimes we don't see our own complicity or how these inequities are created, because they don't just happen. Like, for example, whether it is inequities based on race, on gender, or on caste, these are created. And I think while growing up, the more one read, the more one saw things around. And for me, it was a large part through literature, because we weren't having these kind of discussions at home or even around. But it was through literature that one started to understand and also see that there's a world beyond the cocoon, comfortable world that we lived in. And it was that I think curiosity and also the need to understand it, and also once one understood it and saw that how the role that certain communities play in marginalizing other communities. I think as a person, as a woman, when one understands marginalization, then on sexuality is when one understands marginalizations, and then you realize that beyond you there are other marginalizations that are happening to other communities. And slowly, through working, through interacting, I got involved in people's movements, people who were fighting on for their rights, and that is where I am now. Largely, that's been my life for 20 years, and I think it's very different from the life that I grew up in. And so, and I feel privileged that I am able to do the kind of work that I'm doing. Does that
Yes.
answer your
So
question?
when we talk about it does absolutely. I have
Right.
followed your work for the longest time, and I've been a big fan of I will say my land. So a question that occurs to those of us who have read your writings and who have followed your work is there is this perception that indigenous communities are in the news or are remembered by people in the big cities only when they are looking for the exotic or when there is a conflict over natural resources. But the lived experiences, the rich and vibrant heritage, and the other issues which are there don't get mentioned as much.
Yeah, that's true. And I think not just exotic, but as we were discussing earlier, also to a large extent, the perception is one exotic, sometimes very negative, and also even in terms of when people talk of conflict, most of the times our understanding of why that conflict arises is not clear to a large extent. Sometimes when one hears about, and I think in urban areas when people hear about protests, movements, children wonder or people wonder कि क्यों agitate कर रहे हैं, या why are people protesting, why are people protesting against takeover of land? This is for development, this is for the country. And what doesn't come out is that the development and the way that our country is developing is very skewed. And so in when large tracts of land get taken over for say mines or for other larger development projects which we think bring prosperity, there is a very large section of population that loses not just its land but also its way of life. So whether it is in terms of language, whether it is in terms of culture, in their songs, that is not represented enough. And also that is seen as like, I don't know how it is now in schools, but when we were growing up, there used to be these dances that would happen. So there would be a Rajasthani dance and say a Gujarati dance and an Adivasi dance, whatever that means. And you had, and I'm speaking of schools that are like government schools, where people would just wear, they would wear grass skirts and make nails out of people wearing grass skirts and making nails out of paper, and that would be the representation of Adivasi culture in mainstream. Or so I think that needs to change, and the more people read, or there are more stories that are not just related to urban India or urban upper class, upper caste India. I think the more understanding there will be also of the different worlds that exist. And also now there are a lot of younger and older Adivasi writings which we never get to know of, or we never hear, or we sometimes that effort is also not made to procure that. So I think that is also something that will change this perception. Looking for a work, and that culture is not always written, the languages will not always have a script, but that is something that needs to be discovered, and not just discovered but preserved. And there is a movement that is going on for that. We need to support that movement.
Right. So you mentioned that there is an increasing body of work on these issues. So if you were to recommend some literature for particularly our young viewers who would be interested in getting introduced to these issues beyond what is mentioned in textbooks, which books would be a good way to be introduced to these issues?
I think there is, of course, one of the first works that we had also all read, I think, who was known, who is herself not an Adivasi, but Mashweta Devi, who had written extensively, and that was one that brought struggles, lives, many questions into our lives. The other, I think, is the young authors like Jacinta Kerketa. There is Hemant Talpati, Ruby writes books that are coming out of Adivani. I think a lot of those can be accessed and read. I think they're making a list also later, and I can also provide a list. But uh, there is a lot of song. I think I don't know if many kids have heard it, but there's a song that is very popular, and that video is going around in our area a lot, called "Gaon Chhod Ab Nahi, Jangal Chhod Ab Nahi." That's a small video. It's a song written by Ramlal Majhi, which is about the struggles. But it's not just about the struggles for saving the land, but it's also about the connection that they have with land. For example, the whole concept of God is very different. The fact that nature is there. Right now, we consider them. A lot of the indigenous communities are by default considered to be Hindus, but they have a religion that is different from, like, say, the institutionalized religions that were there. So that I think a lot of that, there are a lot of folk tales which have their own power. A lot of times we don't consider folk tales and the written folk tales as bona fide literature, but I think there is a lot that is there. So I think there are collections taken out by Sahitya Academy, which is the Sarma tales, and a lot of these collections of folk tales and stories of different tribes. I think that also is something that the young readers can read.
So these would be a good way to be introduced to the subject. Right. Rinchin, you've also been working with young people around Raigad and in MP. So what are you working on with them at present?
I think there are two parts to my life. I think one is that I'm a part of a union that works with, where we work with workers' rights, as well as the people that are on human rights. And largely where I live is where people are fighting against the environmental degradation of large coal mines. So a lot of my time actually goes into helping people fight legal cases in courts, whether it is against larger corporations for polluting their water, for causing health effects, for polluting land, and also for the illegal takeover of land. Then there is the Forest Rights Act, which where a lot of people, the Adivasis who don't own land but have been cultivating forests, so their right to forest, there is a whole struggle for people. There is a law, but then there is still a long struggle for people to have that, to get entitlement over their land. So a large part goes into organizing and working with that. That as a lot of paperwork and running to and fro between courts. But the nicer part is the cultural work that we do, or like run libraries. And we have a collective called the Ektara Collective that also makes films. And it is films, people acting in the writing, acting are all people from amongst us. It is not, they're not necessarily mainstream actors. And this collective has made 3 films.
Yes.
2 of them are children's films. One is Chanda Ke Joote, which was written by a small young girl of her first experiences of going to school, and how when these young Adivasi girls who were migrants from Chhattisgarh but into the city of Bhopal started going to school but did not like wearing shoes, and the struggle that they had with their teacher. It's a small film written by one of the children who's now an adult and in college, etc. But her experiences then. There was another called Jadui Machi, which is based in the banks of Hoshangabad, of a fisher community, and but all through the eyes of children. And the last one was Turup, which is actually a it's a film for everyone, but it's a film on, say, the issue of love jihad. And that was also based in Bhopal. So these are these two, and I write, etc.
Right.
With children. One thing that I just want to share, I don't know if it gets too long, but for example, we run small libraries for children in areas where workers, the coal miners live. Because I stay there, the library runs out of my room. And once we were having this class, and where this small child was asking, they were talking about big people and how so everyone was thinking about like important people, Rabindranath Tagore and the Prime Minister, etc. And someone was talking about something about their father and feeling angry because his father couldn't get him a new uniform. And just in talking, we were talking about and how that what does your father do? So my father takes out coal, and every day he goes and he works in an underground mine for 12 hours. And what does he do? He takes out coal. So he said, then where does the coal go? So it goes to a power plant. And then what does the power plant do? It makes electricity. And what does that electricity do? It lights our bulb. And suddenly the child's and everyone's whole point of view changed, where he was thinking of his father, someone not being able to provide, to a position where his father is someone, the worker of this country, someone who provides electricity to the whole country. So it makes him like a hero. So I think just an experience to share, but that's the kind of difference between like the
That's a
two worlds
beautiful
of
story.
children.
Yes, that is a beautiful story. That is a beautiful story. The films that you mentioned here, if our young viewers would want to watch them, where can they access these films?
They're all uploaded on YouTube and Vimeo. So if they go to the Ektara Collective YouTube channel, they'll find all the films there. It's Ektara
Okay.
Collective,
Okay. Right.
and both on the Vimeo and YouTube channel, they'll be able to access the film.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Speaking of films, Aijaz Khan, are you there?
Yes, hi. Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Aijaz. So when we were getting introduced to each other, I thought you would be in Bombay. Then I got to know that you were in Lonavala.
That's right.
So and you've been there since the lockdown began.
Yes. Yes, that's
Right.
right.
So Aijaz directed the movie Hamid, which is a beautiful story. I'm sure most of us have seen it, about a young boy in Kashmir who thinks that the number 786 is the number to talk to God. So he dials the number and gets to talk to somebody on the other end, and thinks that he's having a conversation with God. And it's a beautiful story, but it also picks up a lot on the political situation in Kashmir. Aijaz, this is a question that I've been meaning to ask you. The first part of the question is what is it like making a film for young people, for children? What was the experience like?
Okay. It was a great experience. For me, it doesn't matter, that I'm making a film or it's a children's film. It was a story which changed my views. It was a story which made me think in a different way. For example, thinking about politics through a child's point of view. Even, for example, take the religion as such, where he thinks he has dialed and connected to God. And seeing the whole thing through that what connected with me. It was a story idea. And, it was no way that I could think of relating the story through an elderly person or older character. So one had to think of a child to do this. And that's how this thing came up.
Right. So it's based on an adapted screenplay.
That's right.
It's based on a play.
It's based on a play by Amin Bhatt, and I haven't seen the play, but it was just that one line which I got hooked onto. A friend of mine called me from Srinagar saying that, okay, look, he watched a play, and this is what the play was all about, that a boy, his parents are missing, and he dials 786. It connects to Kashmiri Pandit. So, I changed from Pandit to CRPF Jawan. And that's how things came up. Yeah.
Right. But that difference
I wanted to see the play, but yeah. Sorry.
Right. But that difference between dialing a Kashmiri Pandit and Jawan is also significant, isn't it? Considering.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But what happened was, I had to base the story in today's time, and if I would keep that into Kashmiri Pandit, so it would be based in, say, in 1990s or anywhere at that time, when the migration happened or when the Pandits were asked to leave. So there was a difference. That was a difference, basically. So I wanted to go with today's time and how things were today. So
right.
Yeah.
Just your interests as a filmmaker are also wide ranging. I mean, we talked about this, and I will not give any spoilers. But the current project that you're working on is at the other end of the country, and it's about caste, which also is a political issue in so many ways. So what is it like to deal with such complex issues in such complicated geographies?
Well, I mean, geographies.
To tell stories.
Yeah. So geography, or even religion, if you may say so, it doesn't matter much if the story is gripping. So for me, what matters is the story, and if you tell a story in a manner, that is gripping. That's what gets interest of the audience. That's what I want to say. I mean, as I was hearing this, Rinchin talk earlier, and she said those films, I would love to go and watch those films. There's such beautiful stories where Adivasi girl, she is suffering or going through a problem to wear shoes, to go to school. Wow, that's such a beautiful thought. I mean, stories like this should be made into films. So it's nothing to do with the geography of things or what. It's just a story which is dripping, and that's what gets my attention.
Right. How did you get started with cinema? Has it been a lifelong association, fascination?
Oh yes, it's been ever since I was born. It's like my family was in this business, and that's how it's got me involved in this business. And now my daughter is also showing a lot of interest in this, and she is doing a lot actually. So yeah, that's how I am. Yeah. Yeah.
Aijaz, if you were to recommend films for those of our viewers who are young viewers who are interested in cinema as filmmakers, I'm sure a lot of them are budding filmmakers. So, as a director, which would be your favorite films that you could recommend to them?
See, since we're talking about Hamid, what got me influenced or inspired to think of Hamid was Life is Beautiful. So, I mean, that's one film which is stuck in me ever since, and I can't just get it out. I mean, I think it was a thought which got me thinking to place Hamid in this manner in Kashmir. So that's one of the films, and there are quite a few. There are films which like Turtles Can Fly. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Just to interrupt you. For those of our young viewers who might not have seen Life is Beautiful, although I'm sure most of them have. It's set in the Second World War. It's set in Italy, and it's about a father and a son. In a concentration camp, and about how the father tries to make this whole difficult and terrible experience in a concentration camp, how he tries to help his son cope with it, deal with it. It's a beautiful story. I just thought I'd tell them a bit
that's really nice of you to do that, because so like films like that, I mean, that is one film which really influenced me for Hamid. And then films like Turtles Can Fly or Bakus is another good film. That's an Iraqi film. It talks about two brothers. They decide to go and meet Superman. And, they are in Iraq. And they don't even have a passport. So it's like how the hurdles which goes through just to think of that they are going to meet Superman, because they happen to see Superman in one of the theaters.
What is the title of the film?
It's called Bekas. It's called Bekas. Bekas. I think it is available.
BEKAS.
Yeah, it is. Must be. I think it is on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. It's a beautiful story, and the problems what they go through they just want to go and meet Superman, and Superman is in watching films of Superman. So they think Superman is in United States, and how do they get there? They have no idea. So as they are crossing the hurdles, and someone tells them you need a passport. So he said, what is the passport? It's a booklet. So this little boy goes and folds paper and writes passport on that. So he calls that a passport, and he tries to. So these are the thoughts. If you just see, I mean, that's these young minds, how they think. And that's what one of the dialogues which I have kept in Hamid too, that agar dunya bachon ki nazariye se ho to kitni khoobsurat ho.
Exactly. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, there are lots more. There are quite a few films. There's Children of Heaven, that's Majid Majidi's film. There's The Blue Bicycle, that's a Turkish film. There's Wajida, which is again, a film from Saudi. So where they talk about the culture and how they introduce culture to these young kids. So there are quite a few films. Even in India, there are a few good films where, which talks about all these things. Yeah.
Yes. Which are your favorite filmmakers in India across languages?
Oh, there are quite a few. So it won't be right, or if I just say one, I would say there's quite a few. I mean, I have been, the Guru that, I'm talking about. You're talking about the contemporary filmmakers, or the?
All of them.
Yeah, okay. So there are quite a few.
Across
there's Satyajit Ray. There is Shyam Benegal. There are K. Asif or even Raj Kapoor and that man. There are so many filmmakers who you could see the passion, in watching their film. In today's time, also there are quite a few good directors. There are many actually. Yeah.
I can hear the passion when you're talking about. So, what are the other projects that you're working on? If we can ask you, without spoilers, of course.
Yeah. Well, that's the script which I've been working on since a long time, which talks about the changing of caste system in the early 20th century by this lady. So that's what currently which I'm working on. It took me some time to excuse me. It took me some time to figure out how to write or think of stories, which are, the so-called, or the early 20th century. Well, it's difficult to do it, yeah. So that's one. There are a couple of other stories in this lockdown which I have, developed and which I want to get into screenplay. So there are a few. I mean, yeah.
Right. So this one is early 20th century, so it's also historical in many ways. So you'll have to recreate the period.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Keep those.
Well, it's not as difficult to create the era because there are some locations which I have seen which can be easily converted to then or that era. So it's something which is it's easy to do as such. I mean, because I've done my Recce and traveled there, so I think it's manageable. It is manageable. I have to find a producer. I mean, that's what the most difficult part is, So
that is yes.
Yeah.
That's quite another task. Yes.
Yeah.
But I hope you will be able to get back to the project and as soon as things get back on track, and we can all venture out.
All right. Fingers crossed.
I look forward to this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kenny, are you there?
Yes.
Thank you. Kenny.
Can you hear me?
So Kenny is the second. on our panel. And I don't know if Kenny, you've met Aijaz before in Bombay or
No, we haven't yet.
We haven't. Hi, Kenny.
I
so Kenny's the first thing is I've known him for the longest time, and I have admired his works for the longest time. Kenny's work covers both. He's a writer. He's the author of the novel Chocolate Guitar Momos. He's an actor. He's a filmmaker. Most recently, you'd have seen him in Tigmanch Dhulia's Yara. Very recently for me, because I was trying to figure out how to watch Z here. And he's also a martial artist. So there are multiple hats that he juggles quite adroitly. And so, Kenny, I just wanted to ask you, how did you venture into cinema to begin with? You've always been interested in it.
So it started in class 6, I guess. I had a friend, Amit Lahkar. We are still friends. And Amit, you must remember, I guess, he used to be in Shankar Academy when we were in Cotton. So he used to come over with a video cassette. We had a VCR in our place for that year, loaned to us by someone. So every Sunday he would come over with some film or the other, and we would watch it. And then mom would cook some chicken curry and pudina chutney, and then we would have lunch and then watch the film, or the other way around. So we ended up watching a lot of time. We saw Terminator, Terminator 2, The Fugitive, Blade Runner, and Spielberg films. So I guess that could probably be my most influential period in terms of deciding what I wanted to do with my life. And we did quite a few plays also in school, skits, just some short comedy skits, which became decently popular. So I guess that's how one would say I found my calling. Entertaining people felt good, so I thought, okay, this would be nice to do on a larger scale when I grow up.
Which you did, and then you moved to Bombay. You've had a career in Bombay with mainstream cinema. You were there in Shanghai, and you also made films set in Guwahati in its own unique world, about which I wanted to ask you in some detail. You have a huge fan following in the Northeast. So one of the things is about representation when it comes to cinema from the Northeast. For the longest time, especially, I mean, of course, cinema from the Northeast is quite diverse. So it would be difficult to cover all of them within the period of time that we have here. But when it comes to cinema from Assam, there are certain things that you do differently. Your characters are different. The world in which they inhabit is different. The cuisine that you show is also markedly different in many ways. And of course, there is the humor, and there is the very high quality martial art sequences that are there. In this movie, for instance, Local Kung Fu, which has become a cult classic. I mean, there are memes on Local Kung Fu which are very popular, both among viewers from the Northeast and from those in the rest of the country who are interested in the Northeast. So in many ways, your cinema, the two Local Kung Fu movies and Suspended Inspector Boro, which was your latest film, they are introductions to a part of Assam, a certain generation in Assam, both for viewers in Assam and outside. So how did this process take place?
I guess after spending about 2 years in Bombay, I realized that I ultimately wanted to become a director. So I realized that the only two ways to do it were either one to assist somebody for 4 or 5 years, but I'm too thin-skinned to assist anybody. I wouldn't be able to stand all the if the director gets into a bad mood and takes it out on me, I wouldn't be the one to just quietly take it and say, okay, sir, you're right, sir. So that wasn't for me. And the second option was to have a crorepati father. And I made inquiries, but my parents definitely didn't have money
It was a little
stacked
late for that. Yes.
in the backyard. Yeah, it's a little late for that. No secret walls in the house, also full of cash. So, so around 2010 or so, the DSLR revolution had started, and cameras had become affordable. The DSLRs, the 550D, the Canon 550D was what we found affordable and would give us good enough quality that could be projected on a big screen. So I had lots of friends at the time who guided me, and of course there was YouTube also. So I learned a lot from YouTube, and at that time the internet speeds weren't very high. So with a little bit of patience, I did manage to learn quite a lot from there. And it was through a lot of trial and error that we started making our film, and we shot it over a period of nearly, I think, 6-7 months. The first local kung fu, I would shoot in Guwahati for a few days and go back to Bombay, work on something there, again come back. So after juggling about 3-4 back and forths, I managed to finish the shoot. Then after that, it was about a year of editing and showing people and trying to take it to places, and we got selected at the Oceans Festival. And after that, finally, Durlab Borwa, friend of a friend in Bombay, saw the film and thought it was good enough to invest some money in and help it release in theaters. So that's how it ultimately got released.
A bit about martial arts, because there aren't that many high quality martial arts movies made in India by our own directors. Now you are a martial artist yourself, and you know Wing Chun Kung Fu and Judo as well.
Not so much of judo. I started out with Wing. Practiced a bit of the taekwondo kicks as well. Nowadays, the last few years I've picked up mixed martial arts, so Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling and Muay Thai. So I've been learning all these, and actually the more I learn, the more I realize how terrible I was previously. So every film that I do, when I look back at it after a year, I see, good Lord, my technique was horrible. In local Kung Fu 1, I see the mistakes I've made while applying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu techniques. In local Kung Fu 2, I see all my bad body posture while trying out the wrestling moves. And in Inspector Boro, I see that my footwork and overall body movement could have been much better when I did my kickboxing parts. So that's the thing about me, I guess, is that since I practice it myself, I'm always learning. And so I'm always excited to try out new things that I learn. And I'm not an expert by any means, but it's just that I can sort of, when I do it, it won't look terribly fake compared to some other actors.
Of course, and you wouldn't have to use so many jump cuts.
No. We try to let the camera run as long as possible.
Right. But you've also, in the process of making these movies, you've also got several young, upcoming, talented martial artists / actors who have become famous in their own right. So now you have what one may call an extended family of actors who are quite. Kenny, there is a question that I've been meaning to ask you for a while. And that is, when it comes to representing any culture or any people from the Northeast, there are these two, and this is a question that I asked Rinchin as well, and this is a question which I asked in a slightly modified way to Aijaz, because it applies to all such places in India. There seem to be, in the popular imagination, in literature or in cinema, there seem to be just two ways of showing. Are you there? The video is frozen.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah. There seem to be two ways of showing people, by showing them as perpetually caught up in conflict. In the case of the Northeast, it's about the various music festivals and things that we have. In the case of Central India, indigenous communities, it's about struggle against big corporations, struggle over land. or dancing tribals. And in case of Kashmir, it's again about conflict or the beauty of the place. But the lived experiences of it, the fact that there are other far richer stories to be told, and they don't usually get told either by the media or in literature or cinema. How are you, I mean, how has that influenced you, the choices that you make as a filmmaker? Because your stories are about ordinary people living ordinary lives, except they all know martial arts. But
Siddharth's frozen. Well, I guess while Siddharth takes his time to unfreeze, I might as well carry on answering. I haven't really had the local Kung Fu one. The story came about more as sort of, we took a look at what resources we had. We found out that we had these locations. We found out that we had these actors. We knew that we had one uncle, my first mama, who is also a martial arts teacher, so he would have a major role. And then we had two of his students who were very good martial artists and who would make good villains as well. So we had them. And then we had my cousins who were very funny as well. So we knew that they would make good comic villains. And then we knew that we had these three mamas' houses. We had this hilltop over here, and we had this school ground over here where we could shoot. So the story became a function of the resources that we had available. So that's how we ended up fixing the story of Local Kung Fu 1. Local Kung Fu 2 happened as an adaptation of Shakespeare. There was a Shakespeare adapting competition for which we had to write a treatment, I think. So I wrote the treatment as a martial arts adaptation of the Comedy of Errors, and I submitted it. It didn't get through, of course, but when I narrated it to some friends and family, they found it hilarious. So when it was time to make a second film, I thought, well, why not make this? So that's how we ended up making the second one. And as for stories being about the conflict in our region, the issues are so complex. It's like nobody has dared to attempt to address these issues yet. There have been films addressing smaller aspects of it or just touching lightly on one small aspect, but nobody's tried to put together a big picture of sorts. And a fellow filmmaker, Bidyut Kotoki, I forgot where he said this from, but he said that approximate films about conflict in an area are made about 30 to 40 years after the conflict is over. So that's one interesting observation. So since the peak of the conflict in Assam was the 90s and early 2000s, I'm guessing we'll have films about it in the 2020s, which is coming up now. Anyway, I guess we should have Aijaz's take on this now.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting take. If it is that long, then the films come out. But as far as I do agree that conflicts do make a very good story, which looked through a child's point of view. Yes, it I mean, conflict somehow actually not. I don't know. I mean, it's like it's something which I wanted to show, but again, to show it blatantly or with no restrictions, it was very difficult. Or so one molded in this manner, tried to mold the story in a manner which is balanced in both ways. So that's what happened actually on Hamid. And yes, there, while the process which while shooting and on the film was that I happened to be in Kashmir for a long duration of time while shooting and even before the shoot. So there were, I think that year I must have visited Srinagar at least 4 times. Different months, and that's how one saw the beauty of Kashmir in 4 seasons, and it changes in every way. But if you at that period of time, when you analyze the locals, what the conflict has caused in their mind, especially children, which we're talking about, it's very harsh. It's very harsh. So I have a feeling that these conflicts should be addressed in films, because this is the best way to showcase or to talk about which shows the conflict. If I remember, even one of this Hollywood actors, she made a film which was I forget the name now. I'm bad with names. But anyway, but coming back to the conflict, I think yes, stories do affect us. The film turns out to be even more powerful as such.
Yes. If I may just, hi Sid, I had taken over for 2 minutes while your net was off.
It went offline and I was trying to come. Yeah. I'm really sorry, I missed your answer completely. Please.
No problem. There's one thing I wanted to point out, and Rinchin especially, I guess, would find this. There was the first question, the first poll, I think, was, have you seen a film set in a conflict zone? And there is one film which I think pretty much everyone has seen, except that they don't know that it's in a conflict zone, and that would be Avatar by James Cameron.
It is.
Sorry.
So, yeah, everyone has seen it, but most people will probably not understand it when it happens in their own backyard.
Yes.
Into aliens, and in Hollywood they probably can get it. So filmmaker Devashish Makhija, who has made Aijaz and Bhosle, he had started making written a script or started making, I don't remember exactly which, a film called Unga, in which a tribal boy sees Avatar and says, this is exactly what's happening to my village. So he tries to, I forgot exactly what it was, whether he tries to write to James Cameron or something and all. And so Devashish Makhija even had made contact with them, with the Avatar makers, but it seems they completely shut him down and said that you can't even mention the name Avatar in your film. So, the ways of.
Can I just wanted to say something about conflict zone. Like we see areas as conflict zone, geographical locations, and I think this question's been asked a lot of times that do children need to know about conflict, but like if you ask a Kashmiri child or you ask a child in Manipur or even a child in Bastar, they're living with conflict, and that is a part of their life. But
Yes.
apart from geographical, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can.
Yeah?
It's breaking a
But
little
apart from geographical lines, I think there is, to a large extent, there is conflict everywhere. There is a caste conflict that goes on every day in children who live in, whether it's in urban city or whether a child who comes from a basti. There is a conflict every day in their lives, and whether it is police coming into your basti whenever for a child from a denotified tribe, or being ridiculed in school on terms of caste or on terms of the kind of work or the work that the families do, like rat picking, etc. So I think how children negotiate conflict in their everyday lives, like even in a city, in an urban city, but it's the same child who's going to give his 10th exam, and that child is being picked up in the night and taken to the lockup because on suspicion of robbery, because he or she belongs to a tribe that is traditionally seen as criminal tribe. So how we represent it fleetingly or not but when stories come from those contexts, when stories come from, for example, when you were talking about recommendations that should have been better, like say something like Munu, this graphic novel called Munu that has been written about and is beautiful, which talks about a child growing up in Kashmir with the conflict, or say work of Bama, who is a Dalit feminist writer who writes about, I mean, her stories are not necessarily just for children, but children could enjoy it. It talks about how caste affects our life every day in villages or in cities. Hari Babu's work from Hyderabad, which also talks about just the idea of being, say, Muslim in the country now, or or in a mixed basti, how does it feel? There is work by this organization called Muskan that has been taking out stories by children themselves and what they write about life. So it's like, for example, so conflict is not just the geographical locations, but also every day, because there's so much iniquity. There's always this context, and you cannot, when you write stories from those locations, or you write, or children themselves write, or you write of children or adults from those, they bring in their context with them. They will bring in their conflict with them, whether it's gender or sexuality. When you write about a young girl who lives in a certain place, then you write about her conflict every day when she negotiates her way to school. And if she is
Yes.
Adivasi, or if she is Muslim, then there is another layer that is added to it, or if she is transgender. And so then there's a whole, so I think there are layers of conflicts that which we like, what Kenny also said, that there are, sometimes we don't even recognize those conflicts when they're in our own backyard. So I think for also young children who are listening, and for parents who are listening, I think it's important that we see how a lot of times how cruel we are to people, not cruel but discriminatory, and how discrimination works. I think that is very important to identify, and I think that conflict, there's no way we can escape that conflict in children's literature. And if we take it head on, we only become better people by recognizing.
I completely agree with what you're saying, and my take on this is that, as we were talking earlier, is see, actually the conflict which comes to the children is through the elders. The child doesn't know that that's a conflict. He deals with it as a normal day-to-day life. But it is the elders who push this, that, okay, that's a conflict. And that's what is a problem, because it's like we elders shove down our thoughts to the children. And that's how it progresses.
Yeah.
So, it depends on what is conflict.
Yes.
Thank you. Those are great thoughts for all of us to come away with. I think it's been a really rich exchange of books and films and ideas and creative processes. I just want to step in here, Siddhartha, if that's okay.
Yes. Yes, of course. The polls.
Yes. So during the course of this discussion, you would have seen a few polls popping up on your screens. Let me just share the results with you. The first poll that we put up was, have you read a book or a film set in a conflict zone? And half of the audience, 48%, said yes, and it has left a deep impression on me. What are the issues faced by Indigenous communities? Most people said that you are aware of, and most people said land conflicts and alienation of tribal groups. The other question that we asked, mostly to test audience recall, was, in the film Hamid, 8-year-old Hamid calls God to speak with his father. What is Allah's number? And 100% of them got 786.
That's general knowledge, not audience recall.
I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
Our last question was, which state has 17 tribes and 36 languages in the Northeast? We had a split vote between Nagaland and Assam. The answer that we have is Nagaland.
Is all of them?
Perhaps that is all of them as well. Maybe that is general knowledge too, Kenny. We also have a really interesting question that's come up from a student in grade 2 for Miss Rinchin, which I will just share with you in a minute. Miss Rinchin, I'm from grade 2 and I have read your book, I Will Save My Land. I have asked my grandfather to save his land for me so that I can get more water for farming. Have you also saved your land and cultivated it?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't own land, but in Raigad, the people that I stay with have a plot of land in the forest, and they've also had to fight a lot to save it, and are still fighting to save it. So while it's not my land, but not always, I can't lie, but yeah, sometimes I do help in farming when I can, and I think it's the most. I think it's what probably all of us should do, and but the and thanks to you for bringing it up, because yeah, everyone should have their land, and that's the fight, I think. That's the conflict, that most people are not able to own their own land.
Thank you so much. We have one more question because we have a few minutes left, which I think might be relevant to all of the panelists. I'll just share that with you. This is a question from Soumya Menon. How do we as kids born post-independence authentically learn about these areas? And by this, I think she means the peripheries, the areas of boundaries, given that they are mainly used in the media for propaganda. So
At least she's made the conclusion about propaganda. Right. So yes, Aijaz, Kenny, Rinchin, please.
I think reading, traveling, and knowing, the more you read, the more you seek out work and also information about these areas. And I think also it's also about knowing and also the perspective. So the more we try to seek out work of people that we are talking about, or I think also travel and it would be one way. But I think reading and trying to form your own perspective, looking around yourselves also to see how this world works and how equities and inequities are created. I think that would. But read the book, read Bama, read Marshweta Devi, read Kabir Babu. Yes, there's a lot to read. Read books from Kashmir that are coming out. Munu would be a great way to start. The more you know, the more you question. The more you question, the better one's perspective is, I think.
Thank you.
For all the children, question everything.
Kenny, which films would you recommend as an introduction to Assam today? I wouldn't say the rest of the Northeast because that would be a very long list, but films about contemporary Assam.
I think the closest would probably be Bornoti Bhotiai, directed by Anupam Kaushik Bora. I've acted in it. And apart from that, I'd have to think a little bit, but I think closest to reality, Village Rockstars. Yeah, I guess one would say that it shows one aspect of life in Assam, but as a sort of introduction, I would go with something else.
Okay.
We have. Okay. Thank you, Kenny.
Could you tell us a bit about Bornoti Bhotiai, if you have just a minute, Kenny?
Sure.
I'm sure our viewers would be interested.
It's a sort of social satire. It's set in Majuli, the world's largest river island. Its central characters are 4 boys. They're all friends and they're all in love with the same girl. So all of them try to woo her, and in between there's a lot of other things also going on. How they try to take advantage of various government schemes by setting up a goat farm, and the girl, some old neighbor comes and gives galis for some reason, and then she says, "Sala, ye buddha marta kyun nahi hai?" Instead, she says that he gets a heart attack and dies. So word spreads around that iski zuban kali hai and stuff. So it's got a lot of complex things, and it's told in a very wonderful satirical way. So it's a wonderful, wonderful film. I believe it's available on moviesaints.com now and should be available on realdrama.com after a while. So that's one film I would recommend to people to see what life looks like in Assam.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Siddharth and Kenny, Rinchin and Aijaz. We do have more questions that have come in, but we also realize that we are running out of time. So we have really benefited from this panel discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panelists for a wonderful discussion. Sorry I got logged out.
No worries.
No problem.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all for these extremely informative sessions. We hope to go back to our daily lives with some great insights that we've gathered here. Kamla Bhasin said, "I'm not the wall that divides, I'm the crack that is formed on it." And she urged us to share not only stories of conflict, but that of friendship and love with our neighbors. In fact, Mr. Shivan also highlighted that human existence has a very strong turbulent quality, and once provoked, can become violent easily. So we have a great responsibility to balance our stories. Couples sang of dreams and joining hands and bowing heads and praying for each other, burying our differences as love conquers all. Rinchin and Kenny both spoke about the importance of representation of the different worlds that exist in our country. And Aijaz said, "Agar dunya bachon ki zariyat se ho, to kitni khoobsurat hoti." So thank you for all these brilliant insights. At the Neev Children's Literature Festival and now Neev Online, we believe that discussions must be open and nuanced and filled with stories that people of all age groups will internalize in their own personal way. The dots will connect somewhere, someday, someplace. We believe it is our job through this platform to make everyone think and reflect and ask pertinent questions. Children are naturally curious and are great philosophers too. So the more we nurture their minds to expand and grow, the more they're able to navigate complexities. And that's the motive that drives us. We hope that authors speak to children in a way and manner that is not oversimplified or dumbed down, but actually call for children to question, assimilate, reflect, rise, and grow. We hope that publishers help build stories for children that forge ahead and allow the lines to shift and move where required. And for readers and listeners, we hope that all of us lodge in our memories the special stories we hear and watch that help us navigate our lives in unexpected ways. And for parents and teachers and librarians to share these stories with children every day. The lines are, after all, only imaginary. Thanks once again for joining us here, and we hope to share with you some exciting lineups in the coming weeks and beyond. The first of which we hope to reveal as book clubs for children presented by eminent children's author Ms. Veera Hirnandani, along with some author interactions and book clubs for parents too, leading up to the International Literacy Day, where we'll discuss the role of children's literature and literacy. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much, Sneha, and thank you so much to all our panelists and all of you who've joined us. We will keep putting up events and staging events for you, like Sneha has just said. Please do follow us on our social media handles, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, to find out what we're up to next. We hope to see you next time. Thank you. Happy Independence Day. Jai Hind.